Nero Wolfe and the Twice-Dead Man. It was a Friday in late October when the impossible walked through our door, though at the time it looked like nothing more alarming than a nervous banker with a briefcase. The brownstone was buttoned up tight, as it had been for the past 6 months, ever since that business with the Horvath brothers that I'm not at liberty to discuss. The bulletproof windows caught the afternoon light and threw it back in sheets of gold. The reinforced door frame could have stopped a small truck. Fritz had installed a new buzzer system that played 3 distinct notes depending on who was at the stoop, and he'd taken to checking the security monitor before answering, his old hand steady on the entry controls. I was at my desk in the office, typing up an invoice for a matrimonial case that had concluded with satisfying symmetry. The wife got the house, the husband got his dignity back, and we got our fee plus expenses. Nero Wolfe was in his oversized chair behind his desk, reading a book about Byzantine mosaics and looking as immovable as one. The dogs knew something was wrong before the buzzer sounded. Caesar lifted his massive head first, ears forward. He was sprawled near the door to the front hall, all 110 pounds of black and tan authority. Mars, nearly his equal in size, rolled to his feet from his position by the red leather chair. Apollo started his patrol circuit, lean muscles rippling as he moved from window to door with the precision of a sentry. Minerva, stationed near Wolfe's desk, went absolutely still, her thinking pose, and Diana, the smallest and fastest of the 5 Dobermans, was suddenly at the office door, head cocked, listening to something the rest of us hadn't heard yet. Then Loyal moved, and that's when I paid attention. The pit bull was brick red with a white blaze across his chest like a judge's cravat, 45 pounds of compact muscle and uncanny perception. The notch in his left ear was a souvenir from his street days, before Fritz found him shivering in an alley behind a butcher shop on 9th Avenue. His collar, hand-tooled by Fritz himself, read Loyal in careful letters, with a brass plate engraved, 918 West 35th Street, New York. He rose from his spot near the safe and walked deliberately to stand beside Caesar, and both dogs stared at the hallway with an intensity that made my hand drift toward the desk drawer where I keep my Marley .32. "Company," I said. Wolfe grunted without looking up. "Fritz will manage." "The dogs don't think so." He turned a page. "The dogs are vigilant to a fault. Last week Diana alerted us to a leaf. That leaf was attached to a process server." The buzzer played its 3-note sequence, the one that meant stranger. Through the open office door, I heard Fritz's careful footsteps, then his voice speaking into the intercom in the foyer. There was a pause, another pause. Then Fritz appeared in the doorway, and his expression made me sit up straighter. "A gentleman to see you," he said to Wolfe. "He says his name is Dr. Pemberton Styles. He says it concerns a man who died 2 weeks ago and was murdered last night." Wolfe closed his book with the deliberate care of a man closing a coffin. "That is biologically improbable." "Yes, sir. That's what he said you'd say." "Show him in." Fritz withdrew. The dogs held their positions, but their ears were forward, alert. Caesar's tail was absolutely still. Loyal's eyes never left the hallway. The man who entered was 60 or thereabouts, with iron grey hair and the kind of tan you get from sailing, not sunshine. He wore a charcoal suit that had been tailored on Savile Row, a Yale tie, and an expression that suggested he'd been up all night arguing with God and losing. His briefcase was crocodile leather, old but well-maintained. His shoes were English brogues that cost more than my month's salary. He stopped 3 steps into the office, staring at the dogs. "Good Lord," he said. "They won't harm you unless you attempt violence," Wolfe said. "Please sit down. This is Mr. Goodwin, my assistant. I am Nero Wolfe. You said something to Fritz that strains credulity. Explain." Styles settled gingerly into the red leather chair, keeping one eye on Mars, who'd moved to flank him from the right. "I'm a physician, pathologist. Specifically, I consult for the medical examiner's office. 2 weeks ago, on October 10th, I performed an autopsy on a man named Martin Thayer. He'd been found dead in his apartment, apparent heart attack. My examination confirmed cardiac arrest. Time of death, based on rigor mortis, lividity, body temperature, and stomach contents, was approximately 10 to 11 p.m. on October 9th. And? Wolfe's tone suggested this was wasting his time. Last night, October 24th, Martin Thayer was murdered in his study, shot twice in the chest. The police are investigating it now. Inspector Kramer was at the scene this morning. Styles opened his briefcase and withdrew a folder. I performed the second autopsy 4 hours ago. The bullets killed him, but according to every indicator I can measure, tissue decomposition, cellular breakdown, bacterial colonization, that body had been dead for approximately 2 weeks when the bullets entered it. The office was very quiet. Even the dogs seemed to be listening. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, making it creak. "You're telling me someone shot a corpse?" "I'm telling you someone shot Martin Thayer, and Martin Thayer was already 2 weeks dead when they did it." Styles leaned forward. "I've been a pathologist for 32 years, Mr. Wolfe. I've testified in 97 murder trials. I've never seen anything like this, and I have no explanation for it. But I know what I observed, and I know what the tissue samples show. The autopsy report from October 10th is legitimate. I signed it myself. The autopsy I performed this morning is legitimate. Both are accurate. Both are impossible together." "Nothing is impossible," Wolfe said, "only improbable, or misunderstood. That's why I'm here." Styles set the folder on Wolfe's desk. "The family doesn't know yet. They think it's a straightforward murder investigation. The police don't know yet, except for Kramer, and he's trying to keep it quiet until he understands what happened. But someone killed Martin Thayer last night, and someone else killed him 2 weeks ago, and I need to know which death was the real one before the newspapers get hold of this and turn it into a circus." Wolfe picked up the folder and opened it with one finger, the way a man might open a letter from the tax bureau. He read for 60 seconds, then he closed it and looked at Styles. "No." "I beg your pardon?" "No. I don't accept cases involving medical impossibilities, resurrection fantasies, or elaborate frauds. This is one of those 3. I suggest you consult with a magician or a mortician, whichever seems more appropriate. Good day." Styles's face went red. "Mr. Wolfe, a man is dead. 2 weeks ago, according to you, which means his murder last night was theatrical nonsense. I don't investigate theater. The family will pay." "I don't doubt it. The answer remains no." I cleared my throat. "May I ask a question?" Wolfe glared at me. Styles turned with desperate hope. "Who found the body?" I asked. "Last night, I mean." "His wife, Claudia. She'd been at a gallery opening in Soho. Came home around 11:30. Found him in his study. And 2 weeks ago, his business partner, Jerome Hartwell. Thayer had missed a meeting. Hartwell had a key, let himself in, found Thayer on the floor." "Same apartment?" "Yes. East 63rd Street, near Lexington. The Belmonte building." "And in those 2 weeks between the 2 deaths, nobody saw Martin Thayer walking around, buying groceries, going to work?" Styles hesitated. "His wife says he was away on business. She was visiting her sister in Boston. Hartwell says Thayer had mentioned taking a personal retreat upstate. He owned a cabin in the Catskills." "Convenient," I said. "Extremely," Styles agreed. Wolfe was watching me with the expression of a man watching his roof leak. "Archie, don't. I'm just asking questions. You're encouraging him. I'm being thorough. You're being a pest." He turned back to Styles. "If Martin Thayer died 2 weeks ago of natural causes, who was buried?" "That's just it," Styles said. "Nobody. The body was cremated. Per his wishes, according to the family. The ashes were scattered in the Catskills. That happened on October 14th. Wolfe grunted. "Tidy. Too tidy. That's why Kramer called me at dawn this morning. That's why I'm here. Kramer can solve his own mysteries. Not this one. He's run every possible angle. Twins. Mistaken identity. Switched bodies. Faked death certificates. Nothing fits. The fingerprints match. The dental records match. Both bodies were Martin Thayer. Both deaths were real. The timeline is impossible, but the evidence is airtight. Then the evidence is wrong. I wish it were." Styles stood, picking up his briefcase. "I came here because you have a reputation for seeing what others miss. If you won't help, I understand. But people are going to die over this, Mr. Wolfe. Someone went to tremendous effort to create this illusion, and they did it for a reason. When that reason becomes clear, more bodies will follow. I'd stake my career on it." He headed for the door. The dogs watched him go, but didn't move. Caesar yawned. Loyal settled back down near the safe. After Fritz showed Styles out, and the front door closed, I looked at Wolfe. "You're going to take it?" I said. I am not. You are. You're already thinking about it. I'm thinking about how to escape thinking about it. Too late. It's in your head now, bouncing around like a marble in a tin can. He glowered. The man died of natural causes. Someone shot his corpse as theatre. There's nothing to investigate. Then, why was the corpse fresh enough to pass for a live victim? When his wife found him, why go through the elaborate staging? Why the cremation between deaths? And most importantly, I tapped the folder Styles had left on Wolfe's desk. Why are you reading that autopsy report again, instead of going up to play with your orchids? Wolfe said nothing. He turned a page. I'll call Kramer, I said. Get the details. Then I'll start tracking down the wife, the business partner, and anyone else who might know why Martin Thayer needed to die twice. You'll do nothing of the sort. I'll be tactful. You'll be intolerable. That too. I picked up the phone, but I'll be thorough. Wolfe glared at me for 10 seconds. Then he sighed, a sound like a whale surfacing. Very well. Speak to Kramer. Get the facts. If there's a rational explanation, we'll provide it and be done. If there isn't, he paused, then we'll find out why not. I grinned and started dialing. Outside, the October sun was setting behind the brownstone's bulletproof windows, and somewhere in Manhattan, a man who died twice was waiting to tell us why. The dogs settled in for the evening, satisfied that the day's first mystery had been acknowledged. The second one was just beginning. Inspector Kramer arrived at 6:15, which meant he'd dropped everything and come running the moment I called. That told me more about the case than his words would. He stomped into the office trailing cigar smoke and frustration, his stocky frame vibrating with the particular tension of a cop who's got a case that makes no sense, and a captain breathing down his neck. The dogs barely glanced at him. Caesar lifted one eyebrow in acknowledgement. Mars yawned, and Loyal's tail thumped twice against the floor. They knew Kramer. He'd been through our door often enough to qualify as furniture. This better be good, Kramer growled, dropping into the red leather chair. I've got a dead man who isn't dead, a widow who can't stop crying, a business partner who can't stop talking, and a medical examiner who's threatening to quit unless someone explains how he autopsied the same corpse twice with 2 weeks in between. Sit down, Wolfe said. I am sitting. Then stop vibrating. You're disturbing the dogs. Kramer looked at Caesar, who was watching him with detached interest. Those dogs could sleep through an earthquake. Nevertheless, would you like beer? I'd like answers. Beer first, then answers, possibly. Fritz brought beer, 2 bottles for Wolfe, 1 for Kramer. Nothing for me because I was working. I had my notebook open and my pen ready. Wolfe poured his first glass with the concentration of a chemist preparing a volatile compound. Tell us about Martin Thayer, Wolfe said. Kramer pulled out his own notebook. Worn leather, pages dog-eared. Martin Quincy Thayer, age 48, born in Philadelphia, educated at Princeton and Columbia Business School, moved to New York in 1938, married to Claudia Thayer, née Hartley, for 12 years, no children, lived at the Belmonte, East 63rd, apartment 8C. I whistled. What business? Import-export, specialty goods, artwork, antiques, rare books. Partner was Jerome Hartwell. They've been working together for 15 years. The firm is called Thayer and Hartwell Limited. Offices on Madison Avenue. Kramer flipped a page. On October 9th, Thayer was last seen alive at approximately 7 p.m. by the doorman at the Belmonte. He'd returned from his office, seemed in good spirits. At approximately 8 p.m., his wife left for Boston, visiting her sister already planned, had train tickets purchased a week prior. Sometime between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., Thayer died. The first time, I said. Allegedly the first time, Kramer corrected. Jerome Hartwell found him the next morning, October 10th, around 9 a.m. Called the police, called an ambulance. Body was already cold. Dr. Styles performed the autopsy that afternoon, ruled it cardiac arrest, natural causes, case closed. Cremation? Wolfe asked. October 14th. Claudia Thayer handled the arrangements, said her husband had always wanted cremation, had it specified in his will. She scattered the ashes herself, up in the Catskills near some cabin they owned. There were 3 witnesses, Hartwell, Thayer's lawyer, and someone named Douglas Merrick, who worked at the firm. And between October 10th and October 24th, Kramer's jaw tightened. That's where it gets interesting. According to Claudia Thayer, her husband was taking a personal retreat. She was in Boston. The business partner, Hartwell, says Thayer mentioned going upstate for a while, clearing his head. The cabin in the Catskills fit that story. None of the employees at Thayer and Hartwell saw him, but that wasn't unusual. He'd disappear for a week or two sometimes, working on acquisitions or meeting with private collectors. Convenient, Wolfe murmured. Too convenient. Last night, October 24th, Claudia Thayer returns to the Belmonte apartment around 11:30 p.m. She'd been at a gallery opening downtown, had 30 witnesses who can place her there from 8 to 11. She takes the elevator up, unlocks the door, walks into the study and finds her husband sitting at his desk, shot twice in the chest, still warm, blood everywhere, gun on the floor, a Smith & Wesson .38, registered to Thayer himself. Suicide? I asked. That's what it looked like initially, except the angle's wrong. Bullets entered from the front, slightly right to left, consistent with someone standing 3 or 4 feet away, and Thayer's fingerprints aren't on the gun. It's been wiped clean. So murder, Wolfe said. Murder. But here's the problem. Dr. Styles examined the body this morning, and he says everything about that corpse indicates it's been dead for 2 weeks. The bullets killed it, technically, but only because they entered a dead body. Tissue decomposition, bacterial colonies, cellular breakdown, all consistent with a corpse approximately 14 days old. Wolfe drank beer and said nothing. Kramer leaned forward. I've been a cop for 28 years. I've seen fake IDs, switched bodies, twins pretending to be each other, elaborate insurance frauds. This isn't any of those. The fingerprints match, the dental records match. Dr. Styles personally examined both bodies. Same scar on the left knee from a skiing accident in 1946. Same tattoo on the right shoulder, a small anchor, got it in the Navy. Same everything. It's Martin Thayer. Both times, both deaths. And it's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Wolfe repeated. Someone created this illusion. The question is why. That's why I'm here. Kramer stubbed out his cigar in the ashtray on the corner of Wolfe's desk. Styles said he came to see you. He said you refused the case. I did. And now? Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. Now I'm curious, which is unfortunate. Curiosity is expensive, Inspector. It costs time, thought, and frequently money. In this case, it may cost me my peace of mind. I'll pay. You can't afford me. The family can. Claudia Thayer has money of her own. Her father owned textile mills. She inherited $2 million when he died. And the business is solid. They can pay whatever fee you name. Wolfe looked at me. I shrugged. We've got nothing else this week except that insurance case. And that's just paperwork. Very well. Wolfe set down his glass. My fee is $10,000 plus expenses. If the case proves to be fraud or theater, I'll refund half. If it proves to be genuine murder, I'll keep all of it and charge more. Kramer nodded slowly. Done. What do you need? Facts. Archie will speak to the widow, the business partner, and anyone else who knew Martin Thayer. I'll need copies of both autopsy reports, the death certificate, the cremation records, and access to Thayer's financial records for the past 6 months. You'll have them by tomorrow morning. Also, I'll need to know about the cabin in the Catskills. Who else knew about it? Who had access? Claudia Thayer says only she and her husband. But I'll check property records, see if anyone else was listed as having keys. Wolfe nodded. One more thing, the gun. You said it was registered to Thayer. That's right. Purchased in 1947 from a dealer on Lexington Avenue. He kept it in his desk drawer, according to his wife. And last night, it was on the floor near the body. Right. Not in his hand. No. 3 feet away, approximately. Wiped clean. Yes. Wolfe steepled his fingers. So someone entered the apartment, found Martin Thayer's corpse, already 2 weeks dead, sitting at his desk, shot it twice with Thayer's own gun, wiped the weapon, and departed. Why? That's what I'm paying you to find out. No, Inspector, that's the wrong question. The right question is, who wanted everyone to think Martin Thayer died last night instead of 2 weeks ago? Kramer stared at him. Then slowly, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. You think the whole thing's a setup. I think someone needed time. 2 weeks of it, to be precise. between the first death and the second. During those 2 weeks they did something, moved something, stole something, arranged something. Then they staged the second death to reset the timeline, to make everyone believe Thayer was alive during those crucial 2 weeks. But the cremation was part of the plan. Destroy the evidence of the first death, then produce the corpse for the second death, making it seem fresh. Except Dr. Styles is too good at his job. He recognized the decomposition, and now the illusion is falling apart. Kramer stood up slowly. If you're right, then Claudia Thayer is involved. She arranged the cremation. Possibly. Or she was deceived, or threatened. Or she's a widow twice over and doesn't know which death was real. Wolfe drank the last of his beer. Archie will find out. Won't you, Archie? With bells on, I said. After Kramer left, I closed my notebook and looked at Wolfe. You realize this could be nothing. An elaborate insurance scam, faked death, hidden twin brother, something pedestrian. It could be. But you don't think so? No. Someone with $3 million and a successful business doesn't fake their death for insurance money. They do it for something else, something worth more than money. Like what? That, Wolfe said, rising from his chair with the slow majesty of a mountain deciding to walk, is what you're going to discover. Start with the widow. Women know secrets, even when they think they don't. He headed for the elevator to his plant rooms, leaving me with 6 dogs, a notebook full of questions, and a dead man who'd died twice. Outside, it had started to rain. The Belmonte was the kind of building where the doormen wore gloves, and the elevators had operators who asked your business before pressing a button. I arrived at 10 a.m. Saturday morning, wearing my second-best suit and carrying a leather folder that made me look like I might be from a law firm or an insurance company, something respectable enough to get past the lobby. The doorman was a thin man with white hair and sharp eyes. His nameplate read, Brennan. He looked me over once, decided I wasn't selling encyclopedias, and picked up the house phone. Name? Archie Goodwin. Here to see Mrs. Thayer. She's expecting me. That was optimistic, but Kramer had called ahead and said he'd smooth the way. Brennan murmured into the phone, listened, then nodded and hung up. 8th floor. Mrs. Thayer will meet you at the door. The elevator operator was a young man with slicked-back hair and a bored expression. He took me up in silence, the elevator humming like a sleepy cat. When the doors opened on 8, I stepped into a hallway with thick carpet and 3 doors. The one marked 8C was opening before I reached it. Claudia Thayer was 40 or thereabouts, tall and slender with auburn hair pulled back in a chignon. She wore a black dress that was either mourning clothes or just expensive, probably both. Her eyes were red but dry, and her handshake was firm. She looked like a woman who'd been crying for 2 days and had decided to stop because it wasn't accomplishing anything. Mr. Goodwin, Inspector Kramer said you'd be coming. Please, come in. The apartment was what you'd expect for $3 million. High ceilings, crown molding, windows facing south with a view of Midtown. The furniture was antique but comfortable. The art on the walls was original, and there was a Steinway grand piano near the windows that looked like it actually got played. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and carefully arranged. Everything except the study. She led me through the living room to a door on the right. I haven't touched anything since the police finished. Inspector Kramer said you might want to see it. The study was smaller, darker, lined with bookshelves. A mahogany desk dominated the center, facing the windows. The leather chair behind it was pushed back at an angle. There were 2 holes in the leather backrest, about 6 inches apart. The carpet beneath showed dark stains that someone had tried to clean but couldn't quite eliminate. The smell of gun oil and copper was still faintly present under the scent of furniture polish. This is where you found him, I said. Yes, he was slumped in the chair. I thought. She stopped, composed herself. I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then I saw the blood. What time was this? 11:30, approximately, maybe 11:35. The gallery closed at 11. I took a taxi. Traffic was light. And before that? What time did you leave for the gallery? 7:30. I'd been home all day, but I'd promised the gallery owner, Beatrice Latham, she's a friend, that I'd attend the opening. Martin encouraged me to go. He said he had work to do. Your husband was here when you left? Yes, in this study, working at his desk. Alive. She looked at me with something that might have been anger. or might have been despair. Yes, Mr. Goodwin. Alive. Very much alive. He kissed my cheek and told me to enjoy the evening. And 2 weeks ago, October 9th, I wasn't here. I'd gone to Boston that morning to visit my sister. Martin had seemed tired lately, overworked. I suggested he take some time off, go up to our cabin in the Catskills. He agreed it was a good idea. I left for Boston. He was going to close up some business matters and then head upstate. Did he call you while you were in Boston? She hesitated. No. But that wasn't unusual. The cabin doesn't have a phone. Martin liked it that way. He said it was his escape from the world. And when did you learn he'd died? October 10th. Jerome Hartwell called me in Boston. He said Martin had missed their morning meeting, wasn't answering his office phone, so Jerome had come to the apartment and found him on the floor. Heart attack. Jerome was devastated. They'd been partners for 15 years. You came back to New York? Immediately. I took the next train. Jerome met me at Grand Central, drove me to Bellevue to identify the body. Her voice was flat, reciting facts. Dr. Styles was very kind. He explained that the death had been quick, painless, cardiac arrest. Martin had a weak heart. His father died the same way at 50. We'd known it was a risk. And you arranged for cremation? Yes. Martin's will specified it. He'd always said he didn't want to be buried, didn't want people standing around crying over a grave. He wanted his ashes scattered in the mountains. So I did that. October 14th. Jerome came with me, and Douglas Merrick from the firm, and Martin's lawyer, Benjamin Lassiter. We scattered the ashes near the cabin, said a few words. Then we came home. And for the next 10 days, I mourned, spoke to the lawyer about the estate, started sorting through Martin's papers. She gestured at the desk. There were business matters to resolve, contracts to review. Jerome was helpful. He took over most of the company operations. I was grateful. I wasn't in any condition to make decisions. Until last night. Until last night. She turned away from the study, back toward the living room. I came home and found my husband, dead again, shot this time. Dr. Styles called me this morning, told me the impossible news, that the body I'd identified 2 weeks ago was Martin, and the body I found last night was Martin, and somehow both deaths were real. Can you explain that, Mr. Goodwin? We'd moved back to the living room. She gestured to a sofa, and I sat. She remained standing, arms crossed, staring out the windows at the city. Not yet, I said, but Mr. Wolfe will. He's good at explaining impossible things. Can I ask you some questions about your husband? Of course. Was he in trouble? Financial difficulties? Threats? Enemies? No. The business was successful. We were comfortable. Martin had no enemies that I knew of. Debts? Gambling? Affairs? She turned, and her expression was cold. My husband was a devoted partner and a faithful spouse. He worked hard, cared about his business, and treated me with respect. If he had secrets, they weren't the tawdry kind you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Mrs. Thayer. I'm asking questions because someone killed your husband twice. If Dr. Styles is right, and people don't get killed twice without a reason. She sat down slowly on the sofa opposite mine. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm not thinking clearly. The police asked me the same questions. The answer is no. No debts, no gambling, no affairs. Martin's life was his work, acquiring rare items, negotiating with collectors, building the firm's reputation. That was his passion. Tell me about the firm. Thayer and Hartwell. What do they do exactly? Import and export of specialty goods, art, antiquities, rare books, historical documents. They act as brokers between private collectors. If someone in London wants to sell a Caravaggio, and someone in New York wants to buy one, Thayer and Hartwell handles the transaction. They verify authenticity, arrange transport, manage customs, handle insurance. It's a small operation but very profitable. Who are the clients? I don't know all of them. Martin kept client information confidential. Many collectors prefer anonymity, but I know they've worked with several museums, some wealthy individuals, a few estate sales. Nothing illegal, if that's what you're wondering. I'm wondering everything, I said. What about Jerome Hartwell? What's he like? Solid, dependable. He and Martin met at Columbia, became friends, started the business together. Jerome handles the European contacts. Martin handled the American side. They complemented each other well. You trust him? Completely. He's been a rock through all of this. And Douglas Merrick? Works in the office. Junior associate. Handles documentation and shipping arrangements. I don't know him well. What about the cabin in the Catskills? Who knew about it? Just Martin and me. And Jerome, Martin mentioned it to him once or twice. It wasn't a secret exactly, just private. We bought it 5 years ago. It's remote. No neighbors, no phone. Martin liked going there to think. Could anyone else have accessed it? Did you give keys to anyone? No. We each had a key. I have mine here. She gestured vaguely toward the bedroom. Martin's was on his keychain. And his keychain was found. In his pocket. The police returned it to me with his other personal effects. I made a note. One more question. The night you found him last night, was anything else unusual? Papers moved, drawers open, anything that suggested someone had searched the apartment? She thought about it. No. Everything seemed normal. Except, she paused. Except what? The safe. In Martin's study. The door was ajar, just slightly. I noticed it when I was waiting for the police. Martin always kept it closed. Was anything missing? I don't know. I haven't looked. The police said not to touch anything. Can we look now? She led me back to the study. The safe was built into the wall behind a hinged painting, a landscape of the Hudson River Valley, probably worth a few thousand by itself. She swung the painting aside. The safe door was indeed slightly open, maybe an inch. Do you know the combination? Yes. Martin gave it to me years ago, in case of emergency. She dialed quickly. 3 numbers right, 2 left, 1 right again. The door swung open. Inside were neat stacks of papers, a jewelry box, a few envelopes. I put on gloves, always carry gloves, and carefully lifted out each item. The papers were contracts, mostly, acquisition agreements, bills of sale, certificates of authenticity. The jewelry box contained cufflinks, a pocket watch, nothing extraordinary. The envelopes held cash, maybe $2,000 total, and some old photographs. One envelope was empty. It was larger than the others, manila, unsealed. There was a label on it in neat handwriting, Baltic Acquisition, Confidential. What's this? I asked. Mrs. Thayer stared at it. I don't know, I've never seen it before. Could your husband have removed whatever was inside? I suppose. But why would he label it confidential, and then take it out? Good question. I photographed the envelope with my camera, always carry a camera, and put it back in the safe. Can you ask Jerome Hartwell about it? Baltic Acquisition, see if he knows what it refers to? I can try. Don't mention that the envelope was empty. Just ask casually if he knows about a Baltic acquisition. See what he says. She nodded slowly. You think Jerome is involved? I think somebody is involved. And until we know who, we ask casual questions and watch for nervous answers. I put everything back, closed the safe, swung the painting back into place. We returned to the living room. I gave her my card. If you remember anything else, any detail, no matter how small, call me. If Jerome Hartwell says anything odd, call me. If anyone contacts you asking about your husband's work or the business, call me immediately. Do you think I'm in danger? I think someone went to elaborate trouble to create an impossible situation. That means they're smart, resourceful, and probably desperate. Until we know why, assume everyone is dangerous. She walked me to the door. Mr. Goodwin, do you believe my husband died 2 weeks ago or last night? I believe Dr. Styles. Both. Which means someone is very clever, and we'd better be cleverer. I took the elevator down, nodded to Brennan the doorman, and stepped out into October sunshine that felt colder than it should. A man dying twice wasn't just a mystery. It was a message. I needed to figure out what it was saying. The offices of Thayer and Hartwell Limited occupied the 8th floor of a Madison Avenue building that catered to the kind of businesses that worked in whispers, private banks, estate attorneys, art dealers who didn't advertise. The lobby directory listed them with just initials, T&H Limited, nothing flashy. I arrived Monday morning at 10:15, having called ahead to arrange a meeting with Jerome Hartwell. The receptionist was a woman in her 50s with steel grey hair, and the kind of voice that could make good morning sound like state your business or leave. Her nameplate read Frances Delacroix. "Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Hartwell is expecting you. Please follow me." The office was long and narrow, more corridor than room. Display cases lined the walls, lit with soft spots that made the contents glow like treasure. I caught glimpses as I passed. A medieval manuscript, open to an illuminated page, a jade carving that might have been Ming Dynasty, a collection of antique globes showing continents that no longer existed. Everything was labeled with small cards: private collection, on reserve, sold. Hartwell's office was at the end of the corridor, large windows facing north. The man behind the desk stood as I entered, tall, maybe 6'3", with the build of someone who'd played football in college and then spent 30 years sitting behind desks. His hair was dark going silver, and his suit was Savile Row like Dr. Styles's had been. He had the kind of tan that comes from golf courses, not beaches. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for coming." His handshake was firm, professional. "Can Frances get you coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be fine. Black." Frances withdrew silently. Hartwell gestured to a leather chair facing his desk, and I sat. The chair was comfortable enough to make you forget you were being interviewed. "I understand you're working with Inspector Kramer," Hartwell said, "trying to make sense of this tragedy." Trying being the operative word. "It's a peculiar situation." "That's diplomatic. I'd call it impossible." He leaned back in his chair. "Martin and I were friends for 25 years, partners for 15. I thought I knew him as well as anyone, and now I find out there are things about his death, deaths plural, that make no sense at all. Tell me about October 9th, the first death." Hartwell's expression went distant, remembering. Martin had been working hard. We had several major acquisitions in progress, a collection of Renaissance bronzes from an estate in Florence, a set of illuminated manuscripts from a monastery in Belgium, some Chippendale furniture from an auction house in London. Martin was handling the American end of things. I was coordinating with our European contacts. He'd mentioned feeling tired. Claudia had gone to Boston. Martin was planning to go to their cabin upstate for some rest. But he never made it. No. We had a meeting scheduled for October 10th, 9 a.m., to finalize details on the Belgian manuscripts. Martin didn't show, didn't call. That was unlike him. Martin was meticulous about communication. I tried his office phone, no answer. Tried the apartment, no answer. Finally, around 8:45, I went to the Belmonte myself. I have a key. Martin gave it to me years ago for emergencies. Frances appeared with coffee on a silver tray. I took a cup. She withdrew. "And you found him," I said. "In the living room, on the floor near the sofa. He looked like he'd stood up suddenly and collapsed. I checked for a pulse, couldn't find one. Called the police immediately." Hartwell's hands were steady on his own coffee cup, but his knuckles were white. The police came, then the medical examiner. Dr. Styles performed the autopsy that afternoon. Heart attack. I notified Claudia, helped her make arrangements. Martin wanted cremation, so we did that. Scattered his ashes in the Catskills. Then I tried to keep the business running, while Claudia dealt with the estate. "And for 2 weeks you believed he was dead?" "I knew he was dead. I'd seen the body. I'd identified him at the medical examiner's office. I'd watched his ashes scatter in the wind. Until Friday night. Until Friday night, when Inspector Kramer called me at home and told me Martin had been shot in his study, that Claudia had found him, that Dr. Styles had examined the body and said." He stopped, set down his coffee. "Mr. Goodwin, I'm a rational man. I deal in facts, provenance, documentation. Everything in this business depends on verification, and I cannot verify what Dr. Styles is claiming. It's medically impossible, but politically very convenient," I said. He looked at me sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means someone wanted 2 weeks of time. Time when everyone thought Martin Thayer was dead. Time to do something, move something, change something, steal something. Then they staged the second death to reset the clock, make everyone think Thayer was alive during those 2 weeks. Except Dr. Styles caught the deception." Hartwell was silent for a moment. "Then, you're saying Martin was murdered 2 weeks ago, and someone has been using his death as cover for something else?" "That's one possibility." "What's the other?" "That Martin faked his death 2 weeks ago, did whatever he needed to do, and then got killed for real last Friday by someone who knew what he'd done." "That's insane." It's creative and expensive and complicated, which means whoever did this had significant resources and a significant motive. I pulled out my notebook. Tell me about the business. How does it work? Hartwell relaxed slightly, back on familiar ground. We're brokers, middlemen. If a private collector in Europe wants to sell a valuable item and a museum or collector in America wants to buy it, we handle the transaction. We verify authenticity, arrange transport, manage customs declarations, handle insurance. We take a commission, usually 10 to 15% of the sale price. What kind of items? Art, antiquities, manuscripts, furniture, historical documents, anything rare, valuable, and portable. Last year we handled about 20 transactions, total value approximately $8 million. I whistled softly. That's serious money. It's a serious business. Authentication is critical. If we sell a forgery, our reputation is ruined. So we work with experts, run provenance checks, verify documentation. Every item is legitimate. Every item? His expression hardened. Every item, Mr. Goodwin. We've been in business for 15 years without a single complaint or scandal. Our reputation is spotless. Until now. This has nothing to do with the business. Are you sure? Mrs. Thayer mentioned something called the Baltic acquisition. Ring any bells? Hartwell froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of recognition, quickly suppressed. Where did you hear that term? Does it matter? The Baltic acquisition was a potential deal. It fell through. Tell me about it. He hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no point in holding back. 3 months ago, we were contacted by an intermediary representing a private collector in Latvia. He claimed to have access to a collection of medieval artifacts, goldwork, religious items, manuscripts that had been hidden during World War II and never recovered. He provided photographs, preliminary documentation. If authentic, the collection would be worth millions. And we investigated, sent our European contact, a man named Caspar Lindström, to examine the items. He reported back that the collection was real, but the provenance was questionable. Some of the pieces might have been looted during the war, possibly from museums or Jewish families. We couldn't verify legitimate ownership. So you walked away. We had to. Dealing in stolen or looted art is illegal. We reported our findings to the appropriate authorities and declined the deal. That was in August. And Martin agreed with this decision. Another hesitation. Martin wanted to investigate further. He thought there might be a way to verify legitimate ownership, maybe return the items to their original families, and arrange a legal sale. I disagreed. The risk was too high. We argued about it. Finally, Martin conceded, and we dropped it. Or so you thought. Hartwell's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe Martin didn't drop it. Maybe he kept investigating. Maybe he found something, or did something, and that's why he ended up dead. That's speculation. It's detective work, and here's another speculation. Did Martin travel to Europe in September or October, before his death? No, I would have known. Are you certain? Yes, we coordinate all travel through the office. Neither of us went to Europe after July. I made a note. What about Douglas Merrick? Who is he? Our associate. He's been with us for 3 years. Handles documentation, shipping logistics, customs paperwork. He's good at details. Would he have known about the Baltic acquisition? Possibly. We discussed it in the office, but he wouldn't have had access to the actual negotiations or documentation. I'd like to speak with him. He's on vacation. Went to visit family in Pennsylvania. Won't be back until next week. Convenient. It's been planned for months. Can you give me his home address and phone number? Hartwell wrote them on a business card and handed it across the desk. Mr. Goodwin, I want to help. Martin was my closest friend, but I can't give you information I don't have, and I can't explain a medical impossibility. Someone can. I stood. One more question. The cabin in the Catskills. Did you ever go there? Twice. Martin invited me up for a weekend, years ago. It's remote, dirt road, no neighbors, no phone. Just a small house, a fireplace, some books. Martin loved it there, said it helped him think. Could he have been hiding something there? Documents, artifacts, something related to the Baltic acquisition? I suppose it's possible, But why? That's what I'm going to find out. I left him there, staring at his coffee. As I walked back through the corridor of treasures, I noticed Frances watching me from her desk. Her expression was unreadable. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Possibly. How well did you know Martin Thayer?" "I worked for him for 15 years. "That's not what I asked." She considered this. Mr. Thayer was a demanding employer and a brilliant dealer. He knew art, antiquities, history. He could authenticate a piece by looking at it for 30 seconds. He was devoted to his wife, dedicated to his work, and lately distracted. Distracted how? Preoccupied. He'd stare at his computer for long periods, reading something. He'd take phone calls and close his door. He'd ask me to hold calls for hours at a time. That wasn't like him. When did this start? August, after the Baltic matter fell through, or perhaps didn't fall through, depending on which version you believe. Did you believe it fell through? I believe Mr. Hartwell is a careful man who values reputation over profit. I believe Mr. Thayer was a passionate man who valued discovery over caution. Those two beliefs sometimes conflict. Would Mr. Thayer have pursued the Baltic deal without telling Hartwell? I wouldn't speculate. But if you did? She smiled thinly. Then I'd say Mr. Thayer had a long history of doing exactly what he believed was right, regardless of who disagreed with him. And I'd say he'd been making phone calls to someone in Europe every Wednesday afternoon for the past 6 weeks. And I'd say he asked me to book a seat on a flight to Copenhagen for October 22nd. And then he died on October 9th, and the seat went unused. Copenhagen. He said it was for business. He didn't specify what business. Did you tell Inspector Kramer any of this? He didn't ask the right questions. She went back to her typewriter. You're welcome, Mr. Goodwin. I left the building and walked 3 blocks before finding a phone booth. I called the brownstone. Fritz answered. Put Wolfe on. He is with the orchids. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him Martin Thayer was planning a trip to Europe 2 days before he died. Tell him the Baltic acquisition didn't go away. It went underground. And tell him I'm heading to the Catskills to search that cabin. Fritz's voice was skeptical. He will not like being interrupted. He'll like a dead end even less. I'll be back tomorrow. If anyone calls asking for me, get a name and number. I hung up and headed for the garage where I kept my car. The Catskills were 2 hours away, and the sun was already past noon. If Martin Thayer had hidden something in that cabin, I was going to find it before someone else did, or before they found me. The Catskills in late October were a study in browns and golds, the leaves mostly fallen, the roads winding through valleys that looked like they'd been designed for ambushes. I drove my Heron sedan north on Route 17, watching the rearview mirror out of habit and paranoia. Nobody followed. Nobody suspicious anyway. Just a few trucks, a family in a station wagon, a couple on motorcycles, enjoying what might be the last warm day of autumn. Mrs. Thayer had drawn me a map. The cabin was 40 minutes past Kingston, up a series of increasingly narrow roads that eventually became dirt tracks. She'd warned me there was no phone, no electricity in winter, no neighbors for 2 miles in any direction. Martin loved the isolation, she'd said. He said it was the only place he could truly think, or the only place he could hide something without being observed. I turned off the main road onto a gravel path marked by a mailbox with no name, just a number, 447. The path wound upward through pines and birches, the trees closing overhead like a tunnel. After a mile, the path forked. I took the left branch, as Mrs. Thayer had instructed, and kept going. The cabin appeared suddenly, a small structure of dark wood with a stone chimney and a green metal roof. It sat in a clearing maybe 50 yards across, backed up against a hillside covered in hemlocks. There was a small porch, 2 windows facing front, 1 window on each side. A woodpile was stacked neatly under the eaves. Everything looked peaceful, undisturbed, ordinary. I parked 30 feet away and sat for a moment, watching. No smoke from the chimney, no movement in the windows, no sounds except wind in the trees and a distant crow. I got out quietly, leaving the door ajar so it wouldn't slam. I'd brought my .32 Marley, tucked in my shoulder holster under my jacket. I walked around the cabin once, checking the ground for footprints, tire tracks, anything that suggested recent visitors. The dirt was disturbed near the front door, multiple sets of prints, probably from when Mrs. Thayer and Jerome Hartwell had scattered the ashes 2 weeks ago. But nothing fresher. Nobody had been here since. The door was locked. I used the key Mrs. Thayer had given me. Old brass, worn smooth. The lock clicked, and the door swung inward with a creak that probably scared away any wildlife for 100 yards. Inside smelled of dust and old wood smoke and something else, a faint chemical tang, sharp and wrong. I stood in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust. One main room, maybe 20 by 30 feet, stone fireplace on the left wall, kitchen area in the back corner, sink, propane stove, cabinets, a table with 2 chairs, a sofa facing the fireplace, a single bed in the far corner, bookshelves lining the right wall, crammed with volumes, everything neat, orderly, exactly as you'd expect from a man who valued solitude. Except for the smell. I moved carefully through the room, checking corners, looking for anything out of place. The kitchen cabinets held canned goods, coffee, a bottle of whiskey half empty. The bookshelves were packed with history, art catalogues, novels. The bed was made, blankets tucked tight. Under the bed, nothing. Behind the sofa, nothing. The fireplace had been used recently. There were ashes in the grate, and when I crouched to examine them, I found scraps of paper that hadn't burned completely. I pulled out a few pieces, careful not to tear them further. They were thin, high-quality paper, the kind used for important documents. There was typing on some fragments, but most of it was illegible, just partial words, numbers, letterheads. One piece was larger than the others, maybe 2 inches square. It showed part of a seal or stamp, official-looking, with text in what might have been German or Latvian. I photographed it with my camera and put the fragments carefully into an envelope from my pocket. The smell was stronger near the fireplace. Chemical, medicinal. I followed it. There was a door I'd missed, small and flush with the wall near the kitchen, painted the same color as the walls. No handle, just a small keyhole. I tried the doorknob, locked. I spent 5 minutes working on it with my lockpick. I'm no expert, but Wolfe had insisted I learn the basics, and finally got the mechanism to click. The door swung open, and the smell hit me like a fist. Formaldehyde. The room was tiny, maybe 6 by 8 feet, no windows. Shelves lined 3 walls, and on those shelves were jars. Dozens of them. Glass jars of various sizes, filled with clear liquid, and floating in the liquid were tissue samples. Small pieces carefully labeled. Each jar had a tag with neat handwriting. Liver, MT 10-9. Kidney, MT 10-9. Muscle, arm, MT 10. Martin Thayer. Martin Thayer. I stared at the jars for a long moment, my mind working through possibilities. Then I pulled out my camera and photographed everything. The shelves, the jars, the labels. I didn't touch anything. This was evidence, and disturbing it would be foolish. But I understood what I was looking at. Someone had performed an autopsy on Martin Thayer, here, in this cabin, and they'd preserved samples of his tissue. Why? To prove he'd died on October 9th, to prove the first death was real. But who had done this? Dr. Styles? No, he'd performed the official autopsy at Bellevue. Someone else, someone with medical knowledge and access to formaldehyde and surgical tools. I backed out of the small room and closed the door. My head was spinning. This changed everything. If someone had autopsied Thayer here, then transported the body back to New York for the official autopsy, then... Wait. I went back to the main room and looked around more carefully. The bed. The blankets were tucked tight, but when I pulled them back, there were stains on the mattress. Old stains. Brown. Faded but visible. Blood stains. Someone had died here, or been dead here, and someone had tried to clean up, but hadn't quite managed. I searched more thoroughly this time. The closet held winter clothes, boots, a heavy coat, nothing unusual. The kitchen drawers held utensils, matches, candles, nothing unusual. There, under the sink, a metal box, small, locked. I picked it, opened it. Inside were documents, typewritten pages in English and what looked like German or Latvian, photographs showing medieval artifacts, gold crucifixes, illuminated manuscripts, carved ivory pieces, and a letter dated September 15, signed by someone named Caspar Lindström. I read it quickly. Lindstrom was confirming arrangements for a meeting in Copenhagen on October 20. He'd secured access to the collection. Authentication would require expert examination, but preliminary assessment suggested the pieces were genuine. Provenance remained questionable, but Lindstrom believed he could verify legitimate ownership through archives in Riga and Berlin. Attached documentation showed chain of custody back to 1944. There was more: financial details, shipping arrangements, insurance requirements, and at the bottom, a note in different handwriting. Martin, this is our chance. The pieces are real. The provenance can be established. We can do this legally and ethically, but we have to move quickly. Others are interested. Meet me in Copenhagen. We'll finalize everything. KL. Martin Thayer had been planning to go through with the Baltic acquisition, without telling Hartwell, using his death as cover to complete the deal without his partner's knowledge or opposition. But something had gone wrong. I photographed the documents, put them back in the box, put the box back under the sink. I took one more look around the cabin, checking for anything I'd missed, and found it near the door. A second set of keys, hanging on a nail. They looked like car keys, General Motors, probably a Cadillac or Buick. But Martin Thayer's car had been found in the garage at the Belmonte, so whose keys were these? I pocketed them and left the cabin, locking the door behind me. As I walked back to my car, I was calculating timelines in my head. October 9, Martin Thayer dies at the cabin. Heart attack or murder. Someone performs an unofficial autopsy, preserves tissue samples. October 10, the body is transported back to New York, positioned in the apartment, discovered by Jerome Hartwell. Dr. Styles performs the official autopsy. October 14, cremation. Ashes scattered, body destroyed, evidence eliminated. October 20, you scheduled meeting in Copenhagen. Martin doesn't show because he's dead and cremated. October 24, second murder. Someone stages Thayer's death again, this time with bullets, trying to make it look like the death happened that night, instead of 2 weeks earlier. But why? What was the point of the second death? Unless someone needed to establish that Martin Thayer had been alive during those 2 weeks. Alive and active. Alive long enough to do something, sign something, transfer something. I got in my car and started the engine. As I backed out of the clearing, I saw something that made me stop. Tire tracks, fresh ones, partially hidden by leaves. Not mine. These were wider, heavier. A truck, maybe, or a large car, and they led around to the back of the cabin, where I hadn't walked. I put my car in park and got out again, following the tracks. They curved behind the cabin to a small shed I hadn't noticed, hidden by hemlocks. The shed door was closed but not locked. Inside was a car. A Buick Roadmaster, dark blue, maybe 3 years old. New York plates. I walked around it slowly, checking for damage. Nothing. Clean, well maintained. The interior was empty, except for a road map on the passenger seat. New York to Pennsylvania to Ohio. I checked the registration in the glove compartment. The car was registered to Douglas Merrick, the junior associate from Thayer and Hartwell, the man who was supposedly on vacation visiting family in Pennsylvania. The man whose keys I'd just found hanging in the cabin. I stood there for a moment, thinking it through. Then I walked back to the cabin, went inside, and checked one more time for anything I'd missed. I found it in the bookshelf. A journal, leather-bound, tucked behind a collection of Art Deco catalogues. The handwriting was Martin Thayer's. I'd seen his signature on contracts at the apartment. The last entry was dated October 7th. Douglas has agreed to help. He'll drive up Wednesday with the equipment. Caspar assures me the procedure is safe, but I'm nervous. If this works, we'll have 2 weeks to complete the Copenhagen deal and return everything to its rightful owners. If it doesn't work, well, Claudia will be provided for. The insurance and the business are solid. Jerome will keep everything running. But I have to try. This collection belongs to those families. It's the right thing to do. Wednesday night. Then Thursday morning, Dee will take me back to the city. The hard part begins then. Staying hidden, letting everyone think I'm dead. Working with Caspar to finalize the deal. But it will be worth it. These artifacts will go home. I read it 3 times. Then I photographed the page and put the journal back. Martin Thayer had faked his own death, with Douglas Merrick's help, to give himself 2 weeks of invisibility, while he completed the Baltic acquisition. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. And now 3 people were involved in a conspiracy that had started with a fake death and ended with a real murder. I locked up the cabin, got in my car, and drove back toward New York, breaking every speed limit. I needed to talk to Wolfe. We had a fake death, a real death, tissue samples in jars, a missing associate, and $1 million art deal that might explain everything. Or nothing. The Catskills disappeared behind me as the sun set, and ahead the city waited with its secrets and its corpses and its impossible truths. I made it back to the brownstone by 9 p.m., walking through the door just as Wolfe was finishing dinner. Fritz met me in the hall with his concerned parent expression. "You missed dinner." "I was busy being a detective." "There is duck remaining, and potatoes." "I'll take them in the office, and coffee, strong enough to dissolve a spoon." Wolfe was already in his chair, reading something that looked like it involved ancient Greek. He glanced up as I entered, took in my disheveled appearance and the manila envelope in my hand, and sighed. "You found something?" "I found everything, including Douglas Merrick's car, hidden in a shed behind the cabin, including tissue samples preserved in formaldehyde in a secret room, including journal entries proving Martin Thayer faked his own death with Merrick's help, including documentation showing Thayer was planning to complete the Baltic acquisition deal behind his partner's back." Wolfe closed his book. "Sit. Report." I sat. Fritz brought food. I ate while I talked, laying out everything I'd found at the cabin. The burned documents, the tissue samples, the journal, Merrick's car, the keys, Lindstrom's letter. Wolfe listened without interrupting, his eyes half closed, his fingers steepled. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his eyes. "The tissue samples are critical," he said. "Someone performed an autopsy on Martin Thayer at that cabin on October 9th. Someone with medical training, surgical skill, and access to preservative chemicals. Dr. Styles? Possible. Or someone Styles trained, or someone with comparable expertise. But why preserve the samples? Insurance. Proof. If questions arose about the death, the samples could be tested, proven authentic. They established beyond doubt that Martin Thayer died on October 9th. Except he didn't die. He faked his death. Did he? Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Consider the timeline. Thayer writes in his journal on October 7th that Douglas Merrick will arrive on Wednesday, October 8th with equipment. What equipment? Medical equipment. Surgical tools. Whatever was needed to fake the autopsy. Perhaps. But Thayer also writes that the procedure makes him nervous. What procedure? If he's simply faking death, why is a procedure necessary? I stopped eating. You're saying it wasn't fake. I'm saying someone performed a genuine autopsy on October 9th. Someone cut open Martin Thayer's body, removed tissue samples, and preserved them. Those jars you photographed are real. That blood on the mattress is real. The body Dr. Styles autopsied at Bellevue on October 10th was a genuine corpse, already cold, already showing signs of rigor mortis and lividity consistent with death the night before. So Thayer really did die at the cabin. Yes. And then someone killed him again 2 weeks later. No, Archie. Think. I thought. Then I got it. Someone kept the body preserved for 2 weeks. Refrigerated, frozen maybe, then brought it back to the apartment, posed it, shot it, and made it look like a fresh murder. Precisely. Dr. Styles detected decomposition because the body had been preserved but not perfectly. Frozen tissue shows characteristic cellular damage. The decomposition he observed was post-preservation decay, not post-mortem. The body was indeed 2 weeks old when the bullets entered it. But why? I pushed my plate away. Why go through all this theater? Why fake a heart attack on October 9th, then stage a murder on October 24th? Wolfe reached for the folder Kramer had left. The autopsy reports, death certificate, all the official documents. He paged through slowly. The first death, he said, was ruled natural causes. Heart attack. No investigation, no police involvement, no scrutiny. The body was cremated on October 14th. That created a 2-week window from October 9th to October 24th, during which everyone believed Martin Thayer was dead and cremated. His affairs were settled. His business operations continued. His estate was probated. Life moved forward. And during those 2 weeks someone did something that required Thayer to be officially dead. Exactly. Perhaps they accessed his bank accounts. Perhaps they signed documents in his name. Perhaps they completed transactions he'd authorized. Whatever it was, they needed the world to believe Thayer was gone. But then why stage the second death? Because something went wrong. Perhaps the Copenhagen deal fell through. Perhaps Casper Lindstrom disappeared, or was exposed as a fraud. Perhaps Douglas Merrick got cold feet. Whatever the cause, the plan collapsed, and someone needed to reset the timeline. By making everyone think Thayer died on October 24th instead of October 9th. Correct. If Thayer died on the 24th, then he was alive during those crucial 2 weeks. Alive to authorize transactions, sign documents, make decisions. The staged murder creates an alibi for whatever happened between October 9th and October 24th. I stared at him. That's diabolical. It's desperate and expensive, and indicates at least 3 people working in concert. Martin Thayer, Douglas Merrick, and a third party with medical expertise. Dr. Styles? Unlikely. Styles exposed the deception. If he were complicit, he'd have signed off on the second autopsy without raising questions. Then who? That's what we need to discover, along with the identity of who shot the preserved corpse, and why, and what happened in Copenhagen, and where Douglas Merrick is now. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Telephone. Inspector Kramer. I picked up the receiver. Goodwin. I've got news. Kramer's voice was tight. Douglas Merrick was found an hour ago in his apartment in Queens. Dead. Single gunshot to the head. Door was locked from the inside. Gun in his hand. Looks like suicide. I closed my eyes. When? Medical examiner's preliminary estimate is 36 to 48 hours ago. Sometime Saturday or early Sunday. Before I went to the cabin. What cabin? I'll explain later. Is Styles doing the autopsy? He's there now. Tell him to check for signs of cold storage. Tell him to look for... I glanced at Wolfe, who nodded. Cellular damage consistent with freezing and thawing. Tell him this might not be the first time Merrick died this week. Kramer was silent for a beat. You want to explain that? Tomorrow, in your office, 9 a.m. Bring the files, all of them. Goodwin. Trust me, we've got the whole thing figured out. Almost. I hung up. Wolfe was watching me with something approaching satisfaction. The associate is dead, he said. It wasn't a question. Supposed suicide. But I'll bet Styles finds something interesting when he looks close. He will, because Douglas Merrick didn't commit suicide. He was murdered, probably on Friday night, the same night Martin Thayer's preserved corpse was shot in his study. 2 staged deaths, same night, both designed to look like something they weren't. Who's behind it? Someone who needed Martin Thayer and Douglas Merrick, silenced. Someone who knew about the Baltic acquisition, the fake death, the Copenhagen meeting. Someone who had access to both bodies, the means to preserve them, and the knowledge to stage convincing deaths. Hartwell. Possible, but insufficient motive. If Hartwell wanted to stop the deal, he could have reported Thayer to the authorities, exposed the fraud, dissolved the partnership. Murder is excessive. Unless there's money involved. Big money. $3 million is significant, but not worth this level of risk. No, Archie. This is about more than money. This is about something Martin Thayer discovered. Something connected to that Baltic collection. Something worth killing for. The collection itself? Or what the collection represents? Stolen art, looted treasures, missing families. Thayer's journal mentioned returning artifacts to their rightful owners. But what if someone else wanted those artifacts for themselves? What if the collection was worth more than 3 million? What if it was worth 10 million, 20 million, 50 million? I thought about it. So Thayer and Merrick fake Thayer's death to pursue the deal. But someone finds out. Either Lindstrom betrays them, or someone follows them to Copenhagen, or somehow the plan is exposed. That someone kills them both and takes over the deal for themselves, and stages the deaths to look like they occurred on October 24th, not October 9th, giving themselves an alibi for the 2 weeks when they were actually in Europe, completing the transaction. But who? Wolfe smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. That, Archie, is what we'll discover tomorrow, when we gather everyone in this office and ask the right questions. Call Mrs. Thayer, call Hartwell, Tell them to be here at 11 a.m. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them we've solved the case." "Have we?" "We've solved most of it. The rest will solve itself when the guilty party realizes we know the truth. And if they don't confess, then we'll provide enough evidence to Inspector Kramer that a confession becomes unnecessary." He stood, moving toward the elevator. "I'm going to bed. Tomorrow will be exhausting. Multiple murders, staged deaths, international fraud, stolen art. These cases always involve too much talking." He stepped into the elevator. As the door closed, he added, "Oh, and Archie, carry your gun tomorrow. This killer has proven resourceful and dangerous. I'd prefer you remain alive." The elevator ascended. I sat alone in the office with 6 dogs, 3 unsolved murders, and a theory that was either brilliant or completely wrong. Outside, the city hummed with its usual October rhythms: taxis, honking, voices echoing, the distant wail of a police siren, heading somewhere urgent. Inside the brownstone, I loaded my gun and hoped Wolfe was right. We were about to find out. They arrived at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, summoned by phone calls and Inspector Kramer's authority. The office filled slowly, Mrs. Thayer first, wearing black again, her expression composed but wary. Jerome Hartwell came next, tall and professionally polite. Dr. Pemberton Styles arrived with a leather portfolio containing autopsy reports. And finally, Kramer himself, with 2 detectives flanking him and an expression that said he expected results. The seating arrangements were strategic. Wolfe had Fritz place extra chairs in a semicircle facing his desk. Mrs. Thayer took the red leather chair, Hartwell beside her. Styles sat to the right. Kramer and his men stood near the door. I sat at my desk, notebook open, and watched everyone's faces. The dogs were in the front room, secured. Wolfe had decided their presence might be distracting, though Caesar had grumbled about it. Through the closed door, I could hear occasional snuffling and the click of claws on wood as they patrolled. Wolfe entered from the kitchen at 11:05, moving with his usual deliberate pace. He settled into his chair, arranged himself and surveyed the room like a monarch greeting courtiers. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What I'm about to explain will be disturbing. It involves murder, fraud, and considerable deception. I ask that you allow me to present the facts without interruption. Questions afterward." Mrs. Thayer's hands tightened on her purse. Hartwell's expression was neutral. Styles looked intrigued. Kramer just looked impatient. "Martin Thayer," Wolfe began, "died on October 9th at a cabin in the Catskills. The cause was cardiac arrest. Genuine, natural, tragic. He was 48 years old with a family history of heart disease. His death was not suspicious, not criminal, not faked. He simply died." Mrs. Thayer made a small sound. Hartwell reached over and touched her hand. However, Wolfe continued, "What happened after his death was neither natural nor innocent. Someone, or several someones, decided to use Mr. Thayer's death for a specific purpose. They transported his body to his Manhattan apartment, posed it in the living room, and called the authorities. A death certificate was issued. An autopsy was performed by Dr. Styles, confirming cardiac arrest. The body was then cremated on October 14th. That cremation was real. Martin Thayer's remains were destroyed." "Then what?" Hartwell started. "Let me finish." Wolfe's tone was sharp. For 2 weeks, everyone believed Martin Thayer was dead and cremated. During those 2 weeks, various parties acted on that belief. The business continued. The estate was probated. Accounts were accessed, and someone, I don't yet know who, traveled to Copenhagen to complete a transaction involving a collection of Baltic artifacts. Styles leaned forward. "But the second body?" "There was no second body, Doctor. Or rather, there was, but it wasn't a second death. Someone preserved a portion of Martin Thayer's remains, kept them refrigerated or frozen, and on October 24th, transported them back to the apartment, arranged them in the study, and shot them twice to simulate a fresh murder. You detected the deception because your skills are excellent. The cellular damage, the bacterial colonization, the decomposition patterns, all indicated a corpse approximately 2 weeks old, because it was. The room was absolutely silent. Even Kramer had stopped moving. "Why?" Mrs. Thayer's voice was barely audible. "Why would someone do that?" "To reset the timeline, madam. To make everyone believe your husband died on October 24th instead of October 9th. To create an alibi for the 2 weeks between deaths. But the cremation, Hartwell said, was incomplete, I interjected, or never happened at all. The ashes Mrs. Thayer scattered might have been her husband's, or they might have been substitutes, wood ash, bone meal, anything that looked convincing. Meanwhile, the actual body or key parts of it were preserved, hidden somewhere with access to freezing equipment. That's insane, Hartwell said. It's methodical, Wolfe corrected, and it required 3 things: medical knowledge, physical access to both locations, and a powerful motive. Mr. Goodwin found evidence at the cabin yesterday, tissue samples preserved in formaldehyde, blood stains on the bed, surgical equipment. Someone performed an unofficial autopsy there, someone with training. Dr. Styles went pale. You think I'm involved? No, doctor. You exposed the fraud. If you were complicit, you'd have signed off on the second autopsy, without question. But someone with comparable skills performed that cabin autopsy. Someone Martin Thayer trusted. Someone who knew about the Baltic acquisition. What Baltic acquisition? Mrs. Thayer asked. Wolfe looked at Hartwell. Would you care to explain, Mr. Hartwell? Hartwell's jaw tightened. It was a deal we declined. A collection of medieval artifacts, questionable provenance, possible connections to wartime looting. We decided not to pursue it. You decided, Wolfe said. Martin Thayer did not. He continued investigating. He contacted Caspar Lindström, your European agent. He arranged authentication, verified documentation, planned a meeting in Copenhagen for October 22nd. He intended to complete the transaction and return the artifacts to their original owners, a noble goal if quixotic. How do you know this? Mr. Thayer kept a journal. Mr. Goodwin found it yesterday. The entries are quite detailed. Your partner was planning to fake his death. Briefly, he thought, to give himself freedom to complete the deal without your opposition. He recruited Douglas Merrick to help. Merrick was to drive him back to New York after the staged death, help him stay hidden during the 2 weeks, then travel with him to Copenhagen. Mrs. Thayer was crying silently. Hartwell looked stricken. But Martin Thayer's death wasn't faked, Wolfe continued. It was real. His heart failed on October 9th, exactly as planned, except it wasn't planned. His death was genuine, and someone realized they could use that death to complete the Baltic deal for themselves. Who? Kramer demanded. Someone who knew about the plan, someone who had access to the cabin and the apartment, someone who could hire a medical professional to perform the cabin autopsy and preserve the tissue samples, someone who could travel to Copenhagen on October 22nd, using Martin Thayer's identity perhaps, or working with Caspar Lindström directly. Douglas Merrick, I said. Precisely. Merrick knew everything. He drove to the cabin on October 8th with the equipment. He was present when Thayer died. He performed or arranged the cabin autopsy. He transported the body, or most of it, back to Manhattan for the official autopsy and cremation. He kept key portions preserved. And then he went to Copenhagen, completed the deal, secured the artifacts or their value. When he returned, he staged the second death to reset the timeline, making it appear Thayer died on the 24th. This gave Merrick an alibi for his own actions during the 2 weeks. But Merrick's dead, Kramer said. Suicide. Staged, Wolfe said. Murdered the same night as the second staged death of Martin Thayer. Merrick became a liability. He knew too much, so he was eliminated. By whom? Wolfe looked at Hartwell. By his partner, the person who stood to profit most from Martin Thayer's death and the completion of the Baltic deal, the person who had access to both locations, knowledge of the plan, and a motive to eliminate both Thayer and Merrick. Hartwell stood slowly. You're accusing me. I'm suggesting you had means and opportunity. Motive remains unclear, but I suspect the Baltic collection was worth far more than you admitted. Perhaps 20 million, perhaps 50 million, enough to justify murder. This is absurd. Hartwell's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. Martin was my friend. I've run the business honestly for 15 years. I have no reason to kill anyone. Then explain this, I said, pulling out the keys I'd found at the cabin. Douglas Merrick's car keys, found hanging in Martin Thayer's cabin. Merrick's car was hidden in the shed. Why would his car be there if he wasn't involved? And why would his keys still be there, unless something prevented him from collecting them? Perhaps he forgot them. Or perhaps he died there. Perhaps you killed him at the cabin, after he'd helped you with the staged autopsy. Perhaps you drove his body back to Queens, posed it as a suicide, then returned to complete the second stage death. Hartwell looked at Kramer. Inspector, this is speculation. They have no evidence. We have motive, Wolfe said. We have opportunity. We have suspicious circumstances. And we have one more thing. Dr. Styles' testimony about the tissue samples. Doctor, can you confirm whether the samples Mr. Goodwin photographed match the body you autopsied on October 10th? Styles looked uncomfortable. I'd need to examine them directly, but based on the photographs, yes, they appear to be from the same individual. And if we examine Douglas Merrick's autopsy, will we find similar inconsistencies? Evidence of cold storage, freezing damage, stage death? Styles hesitated. I haven't completed that autopsy yet. But when you do, Wolfe pressed, you'll find he didn't die Saturday or Sunday. He died earlier, possibly on October 9th, the same day as Martin Thayer, possibly at the same location. 2 bodies, 1 cabin, 1 killer, with a plan to profit from both deaths. The room was electric with tension. Hartwell's face was flushed. Kramer was watching him like a hawk watching a rabbit. Then the phone on my desk rang. Everyone jumped. I picked it up. Goodwin. The voice on the other end was female, accented, urgent. Mr. Goodwin? This is Ingrid Lindstrom, Caspar's wife. He told me to call you if anything happened. Something has happened. What? A man came to our home in Copenhagen yesterday. American. He said he was representing Martin Thayer's estate. He wanted the artifacts from the Baltic collection. He had documents, signatures, authorizations. But something was wrong. The signatures didn't look right. And then I saw the date, October 16th, after Martin had supposedly died. What did this man look like? Tall, dark hair going silver, American accent. He was very insistent. He said he had a right to the collection. He threatened Caspar. We called the police. Where is he now? Gone. He left before the police arrived, but he took photographs of the artifacts, and he said he'd be back. He said the collection was his by rights, that he'd earned it. I covered the receiver and looked at Hartwell. Describe the man you met in Copenhagen last week. Hartwell's face went white. I've never been to Copenhagen. Then you won't mind showing Inspector Kramer your passport, to prove you were in New York the whole time. Kramer moved forward. Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to come with me. Hartwell didn't move. For a long moment, I thought he might run. Then his shoulders sagged. It wasn't supposed to be this way, he said quietly. Martin was supposed to live. The whole plan was his idea. Fake the death, complete the deal, return the artifacts to the families. It was noble, ethical, everything Martin wanted. But he died, Wolfe said. He died. At the cabin. Heart attack. Exactly what we'd feared might happen. And suddenly, I had a dead partner, a massive fraud in progress, and a collection worth $30 million waiting in Copenhagen. What was I supposed to do? Not commit 2 more murders, Kramer said. I didn't murder anyone, Hartwell's voice cracked. Martin died naturally. Douglas was supposed to help me complete the deal, but he got cold feet after Martin died. Said it was too dangerous. Wanted to go to the police. So I convinced him to wait, to help me finish what Martin started. We went to Copenhagen together, verified the collection, but Lindstrom refused to release it, said the authorization wasn't valid anymore. Martin was dead. So I forged documents, dated them October 16th, made it look like Martin had been alive and authorizing the deal. But Lindstrom suspected. So I left, came back to New York, tried to figure out what to do, and decided to stage the second death, I said. To give myself an alibi, to make everyone think Martin had been alive through October 24th, so my Copenhagen trip would seem legitimate. But Douglas panicked, said he was going to confess, so He stopped. So you killed him, Kramer finished. Made it look like suicide. It was self-defense. He pulled a gun. We struggled. It went off. And then you shot Martin's preserved remains, staged the study murder, and hoped nobody would notice the timeline inconsistency. I didn't know Dr. Styles would be so thorough. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. A cascade of errors, Mr. Hartwell. From noble intent to multiple murders. All for artifacts you'll never possess and money you'll never spend. Take him, Inspector. Kramer moved forward with his detectives. Hartwell didn't resist. As they led him toward the door, Mrs. Thayer spoke for the first time in minutes. "Did Martin really plan to return the artifacts to their families?" "Yes, madam," Wolfe said gently. "Your husband was honorable to the end. He died trying to do the right thing. That's a better epitaph than most men earn." She nodded, silent tears on her cheeks. After they'd all left, Kramer with his prisoner, Mrs. Thayer with Dr. Styles offering to drive her home, I closed my notebook and looked at Wolfe. "We're sending a bill, right? $10,000 plus expenses, and not a penny refunded." That was mostly guessing. It was entirely deduction based on available evidence. Guessing is for amateurs. Whatever helps you sleep. I stood, stretched. I'm going to walk the dogs. Take Caesar. He's been pacing since 9. I opened the office door and all 6 dogs tumbled in. Caesar leading, Mars and Apollo flanking, Minerva and Diana scouting, Loyal bringing up the rear. They surrounded me with the enthusiasm of guards who'd been dismissed from duty but were now ready for their next assignment. "Come on," I told them. "Let's walk off a case about death, fraud, and people who think they're smarter than Nero Wolfe." Caesar's tail thumped agreement. Outside, October was fading toward November, and the city was full of people who were alive and honest, and mostly staying that way. It was good to be reminded. It was Thursday morning, 2 days after Hartwell's arrest, when Inspector Kramer called with news that changed everything. Caspar Lindstrom is dead. I'd been sorting through the expense receipts for the Thayer case, mileage to the Catskills, film for photographs, the cost of lockpicks I'd broken at the cabin. Mundane work after a spectacular conclusion. Now I sat up straighter, pen frozen. When? Tuesday night. Copenhagen police found him in his apartment. Single gunshot, back of the head, execution style. His wife came home from her sister's and found him. "Hartwell's in custody," I said. "He couldn't have." "I know, which means there's someone else involved. Someone we missed." Kramer's voice was tight with frustration. "The Danish police are investigating, but they've shared preliminary findings. Lindstrom's office had been ransacked, files missing, computer records deleted. They found one thing, an envelope addressed to you. Lindstrom wrote a letter before he died. The police are faxing it over." I covered the receiver and yelled toward the kitchen. "Fritz, is Wolfe upstairs?" "Yes, with the orchids." "Tell him to come down. Emergency." Back to Kramer. "Send the fax to my office. We'll review it and call you back." "I'm coming over. With Hartwell. I want him to hear whatever Lindstrom said." "Give us an hour." I hung up and waited for the fax machine to ring. New technology we'd installed last year over Wolfe's protests. The dogs watched me with interest. Caesar had his head on my desk, brown eyes alert. Loyal was at my feet, solid and warm. The others had arranged themselves around the office in their usual surveillance positions. The fax machine whirred to life. Paper began feeding through, line by line. I watched the words appear, Lindstrom's confession materializing like a ghost's testimony. When it finished, I read it twice. Then I carried it upstairs to interrupt Nero Wolfe's communion with his phalaenopsis. The letter was 5 pages, typed, precise, desperate. "Mr. Goodwin, if you are reading this, I am dead. I write this on Wednesday morning, October 29th, knowing that the people I tried to protect have become the people trying to kill me. I was a fool. I thought I could mediate between justice and greed, between history and profit. I was wrong. My name is Caspar Henrik Lindstrom. I have worked as an art broker and authentication expert in Northern Europe for 30 years. My specialty is medieval artifacts, manuscripts, and stolen art recovery. In July of this year, I was contacted by a man named Viktor Mikhailovich Volkov, who claimed to represent a private collector in Latvia. Volkov presented me with photographs and documentation of a collection that should not exist. Religious artifacts, illuminated manuscripts, gold work, all dating from the 13th, 16th centuries. Based on the provenance he provided, these items had been looted by Soviet forces from churches and private homes in Latvia and Estonia in 19... They should have been destroyed or sent to Moscow. Instead, they had been hidden by a Soviet colonel named Boris Petrov, who died in 19... The collection remained hidden until 2019, when Petrov's grandson discovered them in a wall cavity in his family's home. The collection is worth approximately $40 million, perhaps more. Volkov wanted to sell, but he knew the items were technically stolen property, looted during wartime. He needed a broker who could establish legitimate provenance, verify authentic ownership, and arrange a sale that would satisfy international law. He offered me 15% of the final sale price if I could accomplish this. $6 million, Mr. Goodwin. Enough to retire comfortably. Enough to compromise my principles. I contacted Thayer and Hartwell in August. I knew Martin Thayer by reputation. He was ethical, careful, and had successfully repatriated stolen art before. I thought if anyone could do this legally, he could. I provided photographs and preliminary documentation. Thayer was intrigued. His partner Jerome Hartwell was skeptical. They investigated. Eventually, Hartwell advised declining the deal, citing the questionable provenance. But Martin Thayer contacted me privately. He said he'd found archival records in Berlin and Riga showing chain of custody for most of the items. He believed he could prove legitimate ownership, that the items had been purchased legally before the war, then illegally seized. He wanted to return them to the descendants of the original owners. He proposed a plan: document everything, verify ownership, facilitate returns, and take a modest fee for his services. I agreed. It was the right approach, ethically sound. But Volkov disagreed. He wanted $40 million, not moral satisfaction. He threatened to find another broker, someone less particular about legality. That's when everything went wrong. Martin Thayer proposed an elaborate solution. He would fake his death temporarily, just for 2 weeks, giving himself freedom to travel to Copenhagen, meet with Volkov, and authenticate the collection without Hartwell's interference. Douglas Merrick, his associate, agreed to help. They planned the fake death for October 9th. But on October 9th, Martin Thayer's heart actually stopped. His fake death became real. Merrick contacted me in a panic. I advised him to proceed as planned, perform the autopsy, preserve evidence, complete the cremation. Then Merrick would contact Thayer's widow, explain the situation, and together they'd decide how to proceed with the Baltic collection. Merrick followed my advice, but then Jerome Hartwell discovered the plan. And rather than expose it, Hartwell decided to complete the deal himself. He contacted me, said he was taking over Martin's role, demanded I arrange the Copenhagen meeting. He arrived on October 20th with forged documents, claiming Martin had authorized everything before his death. I refused to cooperate. The documents were obvious forgeries, and Hartwell's manner made me suspicious. I told him I was withdrawing from the deal entirely, returning everything to Volkov, and washing my hands of the matter. Hartwell threatened me, said I was contractually obligated, that he'd sue for damages, that he'd report my involvement to the authorities. I stood firm. He left Copenhagen angry. 2 days later, Douglas Merrick was found dead in New York, supposedly suicide. And Tuesday night, last night, 2 men broke into my office. They were Russian, professionals. They demanded the collection. I told them it was still in Latvia, with Volkov. They didn't believe me. They threatened my wife, said they'd return tonight. So I'm writing this letter, hiding my wife at her sister's, and preparing for what comes next. The truth, Mr. Goodwin, is this. The Baltic collection is real, worth tens of millions, and multiple people want it badly enough to kill for it. Martin Thayer wanted to do the right thing and died naturally. Jerome Hartwell tried to profit from Thayer's death and murdered Douglas Merrick to cover his crimes. And Viktor Volkov, whoever he really is, has now sent assassins to eliminate anyone who knows about the collection. I don't know if Volkov is working alone or represents a larger organization, but I know this. The collection has blood on it now. 4 people are dead because of it. Martin Thayer, Douglas Merrick, possibly 2 others I don't know about. More will die unless someone stops this. I'm sending you 2 things with this letter. First, the location in Latvia, where the collection is hidden. Second, the name of the only person I trust to verify its authenticity and arrange proper repatriation. Professor Helena Kozlov at Vilnius University. She specializes in stolen art recovery and has connections with international authorities. If I'm dead when you read this, please ensure the collection reaches her. Don't let Volkov profit. Don't let Hartwell's crimes be for nothing. Martin Thayer died trying to do the right thing. Someone should finish what he started. With respect and apologies, Kaspar Henrik Lindström. P.S. The location? Jurmala, Latvia, 14 Gentaru Prospects, apartment 7, behind the false wall in the storage room. Volkov's real name is Leonid Shevchenko, former KGB, now operates as an art smuggler. He is dangerous. Proceed carefully. Wolfe set down the letter and looked at me. We were in the office, Kramer and Hartwell, due to arrive in 20 minutes. This complicates things, Wolfe said. That's diplomatic. I'd say it explodes them. I paced to the window. Hartwell killed Merrick, but he didn't kill Lindstrom. Volkov, Shevchenko, sent professionals to silence Lindstrom, which means there's an international criminal organization involved, and they're still active, and still searching for the collection, which is sitting in an apartment in Latvia, waiting for someone to claim it. Wolfe steepled his fingers. This is no longer our case. The murder of Martin Thayer has been solved. Jerome Hartwell is in custody. Our fee has been paid. We're done. Except Lindstrom asked for our help. Lindstrom is dead. His request died with him. There's $40 million in stolen art sitting in Latvia, waiting for international criminals to grab it. Not our problem. There's a professor in Vilnius who can repatriate everything legally. Still not our problem. Martin Thayer died trying to do the right thing. Wolfe glared at me. You're appealing to my conscience. I'm appealing to your sense of completion. This case isn't finished until that collection is secured and returned. Otherwise, Hartwell's crimes were successful. He might not get the money, but criminals will. And Thayer's death will have accomplished nothing. I am not traveling to Latvia. You don't have to. I will. Absolutely not. It's dangerous, international, and involves former KGB. So we pass the information to the appropriate authorities. Interpol, the FBI, whoever handles international art theft. We give them Lindstrom's letter and step back. Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. Contact Professor Kozlov. Explain the situation. Arrange for proper authorities to secure the collection. Ensure Lindstrom's death wasn't in vain. And then we're finished. This case has consumed enough time, energy, and peace of mind. The doorbell rang. Fritz answered, then appeared in the office doorway. Inspector Kramer, with Mr. Hartwell. Show them in. Kramer looked like he'd been awake for 3 days. Hartwell looked worse. Unshaven, haggard, handcuffed. Kramer's detectives positioned themselves near the door, while Hartwell was guided to the red leather chair. You've read Lindstrom's letter? Kramer asked. Yes, Wolfe said. It exonerates Mr. Hartwell of Lindstrom's murder, but confirms his guilt in Douglas Merrick's death. Hartwell spoke for the first time. I told you it was self-defense. You told us many things, Mr. Hartwell. Few of them were true. Wolfe turned to Kramer. The letter reveals a larger criminal enterprise. Leonid Shevchenko, operating as Viktor Volkov, is running an international stolen art smuggling operation. He's connected to the Baltic collection and likely to Lindstrom's death. You'll need to coordinate with Interpol and Danish authorities. Already in progress. The Danish police have identified the 2 men who broke into Lindstrom's office. Russian nationals, suspected contract killers. They're searching for them now. And the collection itself, that's why I'm here. Kramer pulled out his notebook. Lindstrom gave you the location. The FBI wants it. Interpol wants it. The Danish police want it. I want to know what you're going to do with it. Nothing, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will contact Professor Kozlov at Vilnius University. She's an expert in stolen art repatriation. We'll provide her with all relevant information and let her coordinate with appropriate authorities. Just like that? Just like that. This case is concluded. Hartwell laughed bitterly. You're walking away from $40 million. I'm walking away from blood money, Mr. Hartwell. You should have done the same. Kramer stood. I'll need copies of that letter for evidence. Fritz will provide them. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, call Vilnius. Secure the collection. Close this case. I made 3 phone calls that afternoon. First to Professor Helena Kozlov, who answered in accented English and listened carefully to my explanation. She agreed to coordinate with Latvian authorities and Interpol to secure the collection. Second to the FBI's Art Crimes Division, providing them with Lindstrom's letter and Shevchenko's details. Third to Mrs. Thayer, informing her that her husband's noble intentions would be fulfilled. The Baltic collection would be returned to its rightful owners. She cried. Then she thanked me. Then she asked if her husband's name would be remembered as someone who tried to do the right thing. I told her yes, because it was true. 3 weeks later, I read a newspaper article reporting that international authorities had recovered a collection of medieval artifacts in Latvia, valued at approximately $40 million. Professor Kozlov was coordinating repatriation to 7 families across Eastern Europe who could prove legitimate ownership. The article mentioned Martin Thayer's name and his role in documenting the collection's provenance. Leonid Shevchenko remained at large. Jerome Hartwell was convicted of murdering Douglas Merrick and sentenced to 30 years. Claudia Thayer sold the import-export business and moved to California. Dr. Pemberton Styles wrote a paper on post-mortem preservation techniques and became something of a celebrity in forensic pathology circles. And Nero Wolfe never mentioned the case again, except once, when he saw me looking at the newspaper article. Satisfied, he asked. Mostly. That's more than most cases provide. He was right. Martin Thayer had died trying to do the right thing. In the end, he'd succeeded. That was better than most of us could hope for. I filed the article in our case records, closed the folder, and moved on to the next impossible thing that would inevitably walk through our door. Because in this business, impossible things are just Monday mornings waiting to happen. I was wrong about the case being closed. On a Friday morning in mid-November, exactly 3 weeks after Hartwell's conviction, Fritz brought me the mail with an expression that suggested something unpleasant had arrived. "There is a letter," he said, "from Copenhagen, marked urgent." The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper, addressed to me in neat handwriting, no return address, Danish postmark dated 3 days earlier. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter was brief. "Mr. Goodwin, you solved half the puzzle. The other half is still hunting. Be careful. A friend." The photograph showed 2 men in a cafe. I recognized one immediately, Caspar Lindström, alive, laughing at something. The other man was in his 60s, heavy-set, with grey hair and cold eyes. Between them on the table was a leather portfolio, open, showing the corner of a document, with official-looking seals. On the back of the photograph, someone had written 2 words, Moscow, September. I took the letter and photo upstairs to the plant rooms, where Wolfe was inspecting cattleyas with Theodore Horstman. They both looked annoyed at the interruption, Theodore because I'd disturbed the sacred routine, Wolfe because he knew I wouldn't interrupt without good reason. "What?" Wolfe demanded. I handed him the letter and photograph. He read, examined the photo, then read again. His expression went from annoyed to thoughtful to deeply displeased. "This changes nothing," he said. "It changes everything. Lindström was working with someone in Moscow, September, before he contacted Thayer, which means the whole Baltic collection story might have been a setup from the beginning. Speculation. Informed speculation. Look at that portfolio. Those are official documents, Russian documents. What if Volkov Shevchenko wasn't a criminal smuggler? What if he was Russian intelligence, using the Baltic collection as bait for something else? For what? I don't know. Money laundering? A way to move assets? A trap for Western dealers who'd expose their contacts and methods? Whatever it was, Lindström was involved from the start. Wolfe handed back the photograph. Lindström is dead. His involvement is irrelevant. Unless his contact in Moscow is still active, still hunting, still dangerous. To whom? Hartwell is in prison. Martin Thayer is dead. Douglas Merrick is dead. Lindström is dead. Who's left to hunt? Us. We know about the collection. We helped secure it. We're loose ends. Wolfe's expression suggested I was being melodramatic. No one is hunting us, Archie. Then explain the letter. The other half is still hunting. Be careful. That's a warning. It's paranoia. It's information from someone who knows more than they should. We stared at each other. Theodore had wisely retreated to the other end of the greenhouse. Finally, Wolfe sighed. What do you propose? I propose we contact Interpol. Tell them about the photograph. Ask if there's an ongoing investigation into Russian intelligence involvement in art smuggling. See if Lindström had connections we didn't know about. And then we wait, carefully. Wolfe nodded reluctantly. Make the call. But discreetly. I don't want armed agents descending on my house. I called the FBI's Art Crimes Division and was transferred to a special agent named Patricia Walcott, who specialized in international cases. I explained about the letter and photograph, sent copies via secure fax, and waited for her response. She called back 6 hours later. "Mr. Goodwin, you've stumbled into something much larger than a stolen art case." "How much larger?" "The man in that photograph with Lindstrom is Dmitry Grigorovich Volkov, colonel, retired, former KGB, current Federal Security Service. He runs a unit specializing in cultural asset recovery, which is a polite way of saying state-sponsored art theft. He's been on our watch list for 15 years. And Lindstrom was working with him?" "Apparently, we're reviewing Lindstrom's communications now. It looks like he was a double agent, working as an art broker in Copenhagen, but reporting to Moscow on Western collectors, dealers, and acquisition strategies. The Baltic collection might have been bait to identify wealthy Americans willing to buy questionable artifacts. Martin Thayer wasn't buying, he was trying to repatriate, which made him useless to Volkov. But Jerome Hartwell, desperate and willing to forge documents, that's valuable intelligence. Hartwell's arrest probably embarrassed the FSB, and embarrassment makes them dangerous." I felt cold. "So when you say still hunting, I mean Colonel Volkov has a reputation for tying up loose ends. Lindstrom became a loose end and was eliminated. If Volkov believes you or Mr. Wolfe possess information that could expose his operation, you're loose ends too. Are we in danger?" "Probably not immediate danger. You're American citizens on American soil, and killing you would create international incidents. But I'd recommend caution. Don't travel to Europe. Don't meet with anyone claiming to represent the Baltic collection. Don't accept packages from unknown sources. And if you notice surveillance, contact me immediately." "Surveillance?" "Professionals. Teams of 2 or 3, rotating shifts, watching your building. Volkov likes to know where his targets are before he acts." "That's comforting." "It's realistic, Mr. Goodwin. You did excellent work securing that collection, but you also exposed a Russian intelligence operation. There are consequences." After she hung up, I sat at my desk for a long moment, thinking. Then I went to the window and looked out at West 35th Street. A dark sedan was parked across the street, 2 men visible in the front seat. They'd been there when I arrived this morning. They were still there now, watching. I closed the curtains and went to talk to Wolfe. "We're being watched," I told him. We were in the office, door closed, dogs arranged around the room in their guardian positions. Caesar had his head up, alert. Mars was by the window, growling low. Apollo paced. Minerva watched the hallway. Diana monitored the front door. Loyal sat at my feet, tense and ready. "By whom?" Wolfe asked. "Russian intelligence, FSB, Colonel Volkov's people. They've been watching the brownstone since this morning." Wolfe's expression went from annoyed to dangerous. "This is unacceptable. Special Agent Walcott says we're not in immediate danger, but we should be careful." "Careful? They're watching my house, and I should be careful. It's better than them shooting through our bulletproof windows." Marginally. He stood. "Call Kramer. Tell him there are foreign agents conducting surveillance on American citizens. Tell him I expect the police department to do something about it. Kramer's going to say it's federal jurisdiction. Then call your FBI agent and tell her to remove them. She's going to say they need to monitor the situation. Then I'll monitor the situation myself." He moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To demonstrate that I don't tolerate being watched in my own home." Before I could stop him, Wolfe walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the stoop. The dogs followed, all 6 of them, a parade of protective muscle and teeth. Caesar took point. Mars and Apollo flanked. Minerva and Diana ranged wide, and Loyal pressed against Wolfe's leg. I grabbed my gun and followed. The sedan across the street had 2 men inside, 30s, fit, wearing dark clothes. The driver had a newspaper that he wasn't actually reading. The passenger was watching us through binoculars. Wolfe walked down the steps and stood on the sidewalk. Then he raised his voice, not shouting, just projecting with the authority of a man who owns his space. "You, in the sedan, you're on private property, viewing my home without permission. I'm a private citizen, exercising my rights. You will cease surveillance immediately, or I will contact authorities and have you arrested for harassment and trespassing." The men didn't move. The driver lowered his newspaper. The passenger lowered his binoculars. They stared at Wolfe, with expressions that suggested they were used to people being afraid of them. Wolfe stared back with an expression that suggested he'd eaten scarier men for breakfast. Caesar growled. It was a sound like distant thunder, low and promising violence. Mars joined in. Apollo bared teeth. The other dogs formed a semicircle, facing the sedan, absolutely still except for their eyes. The driver said something to his passenger. The passenger shrugged. Then the driver started the engine. The sedan pulled away slowly, deliberately, making it clear they were leaving on their own terms, not because they were intimidated. But they were leaving. Wolfe watched until they turned the corner. Then he looked down at Caesar and scratched behind the Doberman's ears. "Good boy," he said. Then he turned and walked back inside, the dogs following. I stood on the sidewalk for another minute, making sure the sedan didn't return. Then I went back inside, locked the door, 2 deadbolts and a chain, and found Wolfe settling back into his chair in the office. "That was either brave or stupid," I said. "It was necessary. I won't be monitored in my own home. They'll just come back. Different car, different agents. Perhaps, but they'll know I'm aware of them. That changes the dynamic." "To what? Dangerous?" "To honest. They know we know. We know they know. No more pretending. That's progress. That's optimism, bordering on delusion." Wolfe opened his book. "Nevertheless, call your FBI agent. Tell her about the confrontation. Tell her I expect federal protection or federal action, one or the other." I made the call. Agent Walcott listened, sighed, and promised to escalate the matter to appropriate channels, which is government speak for "I'll try but don't hold your breath." For the next 3 days we were careful. I varied my routes when I left the brownstone. Fritz ordered groceries delivered instead of shopping in person. Theodore arrived and departed on unpredictable schedules. Wolfe stayed inside, working on a monograph about Albanian orchid varieties and pretending everything was normal. The dogs were magnificent. They took turns patrolling, maintaining watch, monitoring every sound and movement. Caesar stationed himself at the front windows during the day, sleeping light, ears rotating like radar dishes. Mars guarded the kitchen. Apollo patrolled the hallways. Minerva watched the office. Diana covered the back entrance. And Loyal moved between positions, reinforcing wherever he sensed weakness. On the 4th day, Tuesday morning, a package arrived. Fritz brought it to me with the same expression he'd worn when delivering that letter from Copenhagen. This came. I did not open it. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper, addressed to Nero Wolfe. No return address. Lithuanian postmark. Inside was a wooden box, hand-carved, beautiful, and inside the box was a medieval illuminated manuscript page, protected by archival plastic, showing a religious scene in gold leaf and brilliant colors. There was a note. "Mr. Wolfe, thank you for your help securing the Baltic collection. This page was not part of the main collection. It was a personal item belonging to Caspar Lindström. His widow asked me to send it to you as a token of gratitude. The families have reclaimed their treasures. Justice has been served. Your role was crucial. With deep respect, Professor Helena Kozlov." Wolfe examined the manuscript page for a long moment, holding it carefully by the edges. Then he looked at me. "What do you think?" "I think it's genuine. I think Professor Kozlov is thanking us properly. I stopped. "What?" "I think someone wanted us to receive this, to know that the case really is closed, to prove that the collection was real, the repatriation was successful, and we're not loose ends anymore. Or to prove we were right to help, that Martin Thayer's intentions were honored. That too." Wolfe set the manuscript page carefully on his desk. "Frame it, hang it in the office. A reminder that some cases end with justice instead of compromise." The surveillance stopped that afternoon. I checked the street every hour. No sedans, no watchers, no sense of being monitored. Whatever Colonel Volkov and his FSB unit had decided about us, apparently they'd decided we weren't worth the trouble, or they'd decided to watch from farther away. I mentioned this to Wolfe, who dismissed it with a wave. If they choose to observe from a distance, that's their prerogative. As long as they don't interfere with my routine, I'm indifferent to their existence. You confronted them on the street with 6 attack dogs. That was interfering with my routine. Watching from afar is not. You have an interesting definition of routine. I have a practical definition. Now stop worrying and help me with this monograph. Albanian orchids are complex, and your typing is adequate. The manuscript page was framed 2 weeks later. A beautiful piece, professionally mounted, hanging on the office wall between two watercolors of English countryside. Every time I looked at it, I thought about Martin Thayer trying to do the right thing, about Caspar Lindstrom trying to mediate between justice and greed, about $40 million worth of artifacts finally returned to their rightful owners. And I thought about Colonel Volkov, somewhere in Moscow, reading reports about a private detective and his assistant who disrupted an international operation and walked away alive. On a Friday in December, exactly 2 months after Martin Thayer's first death, I received a final letter. This one had no postmark, no return address. It was slipped under our front door sometime during the night. Mr. Goodwin, Colonel Volkov sends his regards. He appreciates that you and Mr. Wolfe acted honorably throughout this matter. The Baltic collection was bait for a larger operation that ultimately failed due to your interference. The Colonel respects professional competence, even in adversaries. Consider this matter concluded. You will not hear from us again unless you interfere with our operations in the future. Until then, stay safe and keep your bulletproof windows locked. A friend. I showed the letter to Wolfe. He read it, grunted, and handed it back. File it under concluded cases, he said, and stop bringing me international incidents. I didn't bring you this one. It walked through the door. They always walk through the door, Archie. That's the problem with being good at this work. The impossible finds you. He was right. The man who died twice had walked through our door as an impossible medical paradox. We'd solved it, traced it back through fake deaths and real murders and international conspiracies, and somehow survived with our skins intact and a medieval manuscript on our wall. It could have been worse. I filed the letter, locked the file cabinet, and went to walk the dogs. Outside, December in New York was cold and clean, and the brownstone's bulletproof windows glowed warm in the gathering dark. Inside, Nero Wolfe was reading about Albanian orchids, completely unbothered by the fact that Russian intelligence considered him a respected adversary. Just another day at 9118 West 35th Street. It was a week before Christmas when the final piece of the puzzle arrived, and it came in the form of Special Agent Patricia Walcott, standing on our stoop at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Fritz answered the door, recognized her from descriptions I'd provided, and brought her directly to the office where I was reviewing our accounts, and Wolfe was pretending to work on correspondence, but was actually reading a catalogue of rare books. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin. She was 40 or so, with steel grey hair and the kind of eyes that saw through lies as easily as glass. She carried a briefcase that looked government-issued, black leather, scuffed, functional. I apologize for the early hour, but I have information you need to see. Sit, Wolfe said. He didn't offer beer at 8 a.m. What information? She opened the briefcase and withdrew a folder. We completed our investigation into the Baltic collection case. I wanted to brief you personally before we close the file. She glanced at me. What I'm about to tell you is classified, but given your involvement and the fact that you're now on Colonel Volkov's radar, you deserve to know the truth. Go on, I said. Douglas Merrick didn't die in October. He died in March. The room went very still. Even the dogs, who'd been arranged in their usual positions, seemed to lean forward. Explain, Wolfe said. Douglas Merrick, the real Douglas Merrick, was a junior associate at Thayer and Hartwell from 2021 to 2024. In March of this year, he was killed in a car accident on the New Jersey Turnpike. Single vehicle collision. Rainy night. No witnesses. His body was identified by Jerome Hartwell and cremated per his family's wishes. Then who, I said slowly, was working at Thayer and Hartwell for the past 8 months? A Russian intelligence operative named Alexei Sokolov. He assumed Merrick's identity in April, using forged documents, fabricated work history, and extensive knowledge of the art import business. His mission was to infiltrate Thayer and Hartwell, identify potential Western buyers for the Baltic collection, and report back to Colonel Volkov. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. The entire operation was intelligence gathering. Exactly. The Baltic collection was real. $40 million in medieval artifacts, exactly as described. But its purpose wasn't profit. It was bait. Volkov wanted to identify wealthy Americans willing to buy questionable art, trace their financial networks, map their international connections. That intelligence is worth far more than $40 million. And Martin Thayer walked directly into the trap. I said. With enthusiasm, Thayer's idealism made him the perfect target. When he proposed repatriating the artifacts legally, Volkov saw an opportunity to test his operation. Would Thayer actually complete the authentication process? Would he identify legitimate owners? Would American authorities intervene? The whole thing was an experiment. Except Thayer died, Wolfe said. Except Thayer died. That's where Jerome Hartwell became interesting. Sokolov, the fake Merrick, reported back to Moscow that Thayer's partner was willing to complete the deal illegally. Hartwell would forge documents, bribe officials, whatever it took. That made him a valuable intelligence asset. Someone who could be compromised, blackmailed, controlled. So Sokolov helped Hartwell fake the second death. I said, the preserved corpse, the staged murder, the suicide, all of it designed to give Hartwell an alibi while simultaneously gathering more intelligence. Correct. But something went wrong. Hartwell killed Sokolov for real. We believe in a genuine struggle, probably exactly as Hartwell claimed. Sokolov's death wasn't planned. It disrupted Volkov's operation. And that's when Lindstrom became a liability. Lindstrom knew about Sokolov's real identity. We think so. Lindstrom was working both sides, helping Thayer authenticate the collection, but reporting to Volkov through Sokolov. When Sokolov died, Lindstrom tried to extract himself from the operation, but Volkov doesn't tolerate loose ends. Lindstrom was eliminated. And then Volkov sent agents to watch us, I said, to see if we knew about Sokolov's identity. Exactly. If you'd identified Sokolov as a Russian operative, that would have exposed the entire operation. Volkov needed to know if you were a threat. When you confronted his surveillance team and then accepted Professor Kozlov's gift without raising alarms, Volkov decided you were no longer relevant. You'd solved the murders but missed the espionage angle. That made you safe to ignore. Wolfe was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "You're telling us we were used. The entire case, Martin Thayer's death, Hartwell's crimes, our investigation, all of it was intelligence theater. I'm telling you that sometimes cases have layers we don't see until later. You solved the murders. That's what you were hired to do. The espionage aspect was classified, operational, beyond your scope. A polite way of saying we were outsmarted. An honest way of saying international intelligence operations are complex and multi-layered. You did excellent work, Mr. Wolfe. You stopped a killer. You helped secure a stolen art collection. You prevented a Russian intelligence operation from compromising more American citizens. That's a win by any measure." "It doesn't feel like one." Agent Walcott closed her briefcase and stood. "I understand, but consider this. Colonel Volkov respects you. That's rare. Most people who interfere with his operations end up dead. You ended up with a medieval manuscript and a polite warning. That suggests he views you as a peer, not an adversary. In the intelligence world, that's significant." "In my world," Wolfe said, "I prefer to be neither. Unfortunately, you don't get to choose. You're good at what you do. That makes you relevant, and relevance brings attention, whether you want it or not." She moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The manuscript Professor Kozlov sent you, we analyzed it. It's genuine, 14th century, worth approximately $200,000. It was legitimately Caspar Lindstrom's property, and his widow did ask Professor Kozlov to send it as thanks. But the choice of that particular page was interesting." "Why?" "It depicts Saint Sebastian, patron saint of soldiers, protecting against plague and enemies. In medieval symbolism, it represents survival in the face of danger. Professor Kozlov is a very careful woman. I think she was sending you a message. You survived something that should have killed you. Honor that survival by staying vigilant." She left. Fritz showed her out. I sat in silence, processing everything she'd said. Finally, I looked at Wolfe. "We got played." "We did our job," Wolfe corrected. "Jerome Hartwell murdered Douglas Merrick, or rather, murdered Alexei Sokolov, who was pretending to be Douglas Merrick. That's still murder. The victim's real identity is irrelevant to the crime. But the victim was a Russian intelligence operative, who was murdered by an American art dealer for reasons unrelated to espionage. The law doesn't care about the victim's other activities. Dead is dead." "You're rationalizing." "I'm compartmentalizing. We were hired to solve impossible deaths. We solved them. Everything else is noise. Expensive, classified, dangerous noise. Nevertheless, noise. He picked up his book catalogue. "Now stop bothering me about international espionage and help Fritz with Christmas shopping. He wants to know what kind of wine pairs with goose." I shook my head and went to find Fritz. Behind me, Wolfe turned pages with deliberate calm, completely unbothered by the revelation that we'd been pawns in a Russian intelligence operation, or pretending to be unbothered, which for Nero Wolfe was the same thing. On Christmas Eve, I stood in the office, looking at the illuminated manuscript on the wall. Saint Sebastian, pierced with arrows, surviving against impossible odds. A message, a warning, a reminder. The case of Martin Thayer, the man who died twice, was officially closed. Hartwell was in prison. Sokolov was dead. Lindstrom was dead. The Baltic collection was secure. Justice had been served. But I thought about the layers beneath. The intelligence operation. The international conspiracies. The Russian colonel in Moscow, who considered us professional adversaries. The bulletproof windows and reinforced doors that suddenly felt necessary, instead of paranoid. Wolfe entered the office, moving slowly, carrying a glass of wine. He looked at me, then at the manuscript. "Still bothered?" he asked. "Still thinking." "Don't. The case is closed. Thinking about closed cases is like reading finished books, pointless and potentially depressing. Someone once told me that unexamined cases lead to repeated mistakes. I never said that. You should have." He grunted and settled into his chair. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first real snow of December, transforming West 35th Street into something clean and temporary and beautiful. "Archie," Wolfe said after a moment, "we did good work. We solved impossible deaths. We helped recover stolen art. We survived Russian intelligence operations. That's more than most detectives can claim in a career, let alone a single case." "I know." "Then stop brooding. It's Christmas. Fritz has prepared goose. There's wine. The dogs are content. Tomorrow will bring new problems and new impossibilities. Tonight, let's pretend we've earned peace." I looked at him. "Have we?" "Of course not. But we'll pretend anyway. That's what makes us civilized." He was right. He usually was. About the things that mattered. I turned away from the manuscript and its warnings. Tomorrow would be complicated. Tonight there was goose and wine and the brownstone's warm lights glowing against the snow. The man who died twice was at peace, his artifacts returned, his murderer imprisoned. And we were alive, professional, and officially recognized by Russian intelligence as worthy adversaries. It was more than most people got for Christmas. I'd take it. It was April, 6 months after the case concluded, when I read in the Times that Jerome Hartwell had died in prison. Heart attack. Natural causes. 48 years old, same age as Martin Thayer had been. I showed the obituary to Wolfe at breakfast. He read it while eating sausage and eggs, his expression unchanged. "Coincidence?" I asked. "Possibly, or justice of a different kind." He set down the paper. Hartwell lived 6 months longer than Douglas Merrick or Alexei Sokolov would have lived. He confessed to murder. He accepted responsibility. That's more than many killers manage. It's also convenient. Dead men can't reveal secrets about Russian intelligence operations. No, they can't. Wolfe drank coffee. Which is why we're fortunate to be living, breathing and eating breakfast in April instead of occupying obituary columns ourselves. You think Volkov reached into an American prison and arranged a heart attack? I think powerful organizations have long reaches. I think loose ends get eliminated, and I think we're fortunate that Colonel Volkov decided we weren't loose ends. Yet. But if that changes, we have bulletproof windows, trained dogs, and excellent instincts. We'll manage. He was right. We always managed. Outside, spring was transforming New York into something green and hopeful. The dogs were in the yard. Fritz had opened the back door, and all 6 were patrolling the garden, sniffing flowers, monitoring the walls, keeping watch. Caesar led as always, Mars enforced, Apollo scouted, Minerva calculated, Diana detected, and Loyal stayed close to Fritz while he planted herbs. Inside, the brownstone hummed with its usual rhythms. Theodore was in the plant rooms with Wolfe's orchids. Fritz was preparing lunch. I was typing up invoices for 3 new cases. A missing inheritance, a disputed will, a suspicious business partner. Normal cases, solvable cases, Cases without impossible deaths or Russian intelligence operations. The illuminated manuscript still hung on the office wall. Saint Sebastian, surviving against odds. A reminder that we'd walked into something dangerous and walked out alive. I'd take that. The doorbell rang. Fritz answered. A moment later, he appeared in the office doorway. "A gentleman to see you. He says his name is Dr. Harrison Styles. He says it concerns a woman who died 3 weeks ago and was murdered last night." I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe looked at me. Then he sighed. "Show him in." And just like that, the impossible was walking through our door again. But that's another case. This one, the man who died twice, the Baltic collection, the Russian intelligence operation, and the truth about Douglas Merrick. This one was finished. Martin Thayer got his justice. The artifacts found their families. The guilty were punished. And we survived to solve another day. In this business, that's called a happy ending. Even if it comes with bulletproof windows and Russian intelligence watching from Moscow. Even if,